The chandeliers in the Aldercrest Hotel ballroom cost more than Petra had made in the last 3 years combined. She knew this because she'd once overheard Sylvie mention it, casually, the way Sylvie mentioned everything that was meant to make Petra feel small, while adjusting one of her diamond earrings in the elevator mirror. That was Sylvie, always decorating her cruelty with facts. Petra stood near the edge of the room where the carpet met the marble, holding a glass of sparkling water she hadn't touched. She'd been here 40 minutes. In those 40 minutes, she'd spoken to no one, been spoken to by no one, and watched her sister collect admirers the way other people collected lint effortlessly, without trying, and in large quantities. "You shouldn't have come," Sylvie had said in the car, not looking at her. "These events have a certain aesthetic." Petra had looked out the window and said nothing. She'd come because their father had asked her to. Because their father, who owed a debt she was only beginning to understand the size of, had said please in a way that didn't sound like please, so much as I am running out of options, and you are the last one. And Petra, despite everything, despite the years of being the wrong sister in every room she'd ever entered, had put on the only formal dress she owned, a blue one that had been on clearance twice before she'd found it, and gotten in the car. Now Sylvie was laughing across the room with 3 men in suits that probably cost more than Petra's car. One of them leaned in to say something close to her ear. Sylvie laughed again, tilting her head in that practiced way, and then, as if she'd sensed it, turned and found Petra's eyes across the crowd. The smile didn't leave her face, it just changed. Sylvie excused herself and crossed the room. She moved like she was always being watched, because she usually was. "I see you found the corner," Sylvie said. She glanced at the dress. "Did you iron that?" "Yes." "With what?" "A pot." One of the men Sylvie had left behind was still watching. Petra felt the weight of it. She felt the weight of every set of eyes that had drifted over to witness the exchange, measured it, and moved on. Because Sylvie's sister was not interesting enough to hold attention for long. "I'm here for Dad," Petra said. "Dad's not here yet." Sylvie plucked a canapé from a passing tray without looking at it. "You're just standing in a corner, holding water, and looking like you got lost on your way to a church potluck." Petra didn't answer. She'd learned a long time ago that answering gave Sylvie material. "Honestly, Petra." Sylvie lowered her voice, which somehow made it carry further. "You're embarrassing him just by existing in a place like this. Do you understand what this event is? Who attends this? These aren't your spreadsheet people. These are real people. With real money. I work with real money," Petra said quietly. "I just don't own any." Sylvie smiled the way a cat smiles. "Exactly." She turned and walked back toward the men, who straightened when she approached, and Petra stood in her corner with her untouched water and the sound of her own heartbeat in her ears, and she thought, "I will not leave first. I will not give her that." It was a small thing to hold on to, but it was hers. She didn't notice him until the room noticed him first. There was a shift, a kind of atmospheric change, the way air pressure drops before a storm. Conversations didn't stop exactly. They just got quieter, more careful. Men who'd been leaning back in their chairs sat up. Women who'd been scanning the room found something else to look at. Petra followed the current. He came in from the side entrance, not the main doors. He didn't make an entrance so much as he simply appeared at the edge of the room. Tall, maybe 6'2", wearing a dark suit that was expensive in the way that didn't announce itself. His hair was dark and slightly overgrown. His jaw hadn't been shaved in a few days. There was a scar above his left eyebrow that no amount of tailoring could distract from. He moved with the particular stillness of a man who had learned long ago that movement attracted attention, and that attention was not always welcome. He was older than the men Sylvie had been talking to. Mid-40s, maybe. The kind of face that had been through weather. He stopped near the bar, said something to the man beside him without turning his head. The man nodded immediately and left. Someone near Petra whispered a name. She caught only the last syllable. Aid. She turned back to her water. She didn't know who he was. She didn't particularly want to. Men like that, men who made rooms go quiet, had never once looked in her direction, and she'd made her peace with that sometime around age 19, When she'd figured out that invisible had its advantages, you could watch, you could calculate. You could understand a room without ever having to perform for it. It was the only useful thing about being forgettable. Sylvie found her again 20 minutes later. This time she brought an audience. 2 women who had that particular polished look of people who'd been expensive for so long they'd forgotten what effort felt like. They stood slightly behind Sylvie, which was where Sylvie liked people. "There she is," Sylvie said, with the warmth of someone presenting a curiosity. "My sister. She does bookkeeping." The word landed like a joke she hadn't finished yet. She drove 40 minutes in a 2014 Civic to attend a gala that costs $3,000 a plate. One of the women covered a smile with her champagne glass. "She doesn't have a ticket," Sylvie continued, pleasantly. "She's here as my +1, which I'm beginning to regret." She tilted her head at Petra. "How are you holding up, hon? Your feet hurt. I know those aren't heels you're used to." Petra looked at her sister, then she looked at the 2 women. Then she looked back at her sister. Sylvie blinked. She said, "Excuse me, I'm asking if you're done. Because this is the 3rd time tonight. You've walked over here to tell me I don't belong. I heard you the first time. The acoustics in here are very good." She held up her glass. "I'm going to get a refill. Do you want anything? Or are you all set?" Silence. The 2 women exchanged a glance. Sylvie's expression went very still in a way that meant she was going to make Petra pay for this later, in private, where there were no witnesses. But right now in public she only said, "Don't be dramatic," and turned away. Petra walked toward the bar. Her hands were steady. She'd made sure of that. She set her empty glass on the counter and said, "Still water, please," and then she became aware, with the particular animal instinct of someone who'd spent their whole life being watched without being seen, that someone behind her was not just passing by. She turned. The man with the scar was standing 4 feet away. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the bar, at the glass in the bartender's hand, and his expression was exactly as closed as it had been across the room. But he was standing here, 4 feet away, when there was 30 feet of bar in both directions. Petra turned back around. The bartender gave her the water. "You forgot to tell her off," said a voice. Low, measured, slightly gravelled, like a man who'd been in enough rooms where he'd had to make himself heard without raising his voice. She didn't turn immediately. She took 1 drink of her water first. Then she turned. He was looking at her now, directly. Not the way most men looked. Not assessing, not dismissing. More the way you look at an equation that's produced an unexpected result. "I didn't forget," Petra said. "I just know the return on investment. There isn't one." Something shifted in his face, not a smile, more like the precondition of one. "How long has she been doing it?" he said. "Tonight, about 40 minutes. Petra picked up her glass. "In general, 26 years. He was quiet for a moment, then Kellner. It wasn't an introduction so much as a statement, like he was placing a file on the table. "Petra Vane," she said, and watched his eyes. He knew the name. She could see it. The slight recalibration. The pause just long enough to mean something. He knew the name because he knew her father. Of course he did. Men like Kellner didn't come to events like this to eat $3,000 plates. They came because they were owed something by someone in the room, and her father was in that room, or would be when he finally arrived. "Your father is late," Kellner said. "My father is always late," Petra said. "He thinks it projects confidence. It doesn't. It just means everyone has been there longer." Kellner looked at her for a moment without speaking. It wasn't uncomfortable exactly. It was more like being read. "He owes me a significant amount of money," Kellner said. "I know. Do you know how much?" She did. She knew because she was the one who'd gone through her father's actual books. Not the books he showed to other people, but the real ones. The ones he kept in a locked drawer in his home office that he thought she didn't know the combination to. She knew because she'd sat at the kitchen table at 2 in the morning for 3 nights running and traced every transaction, every borrowed figure, every misallocated sum. $412,000, she said, plus whatever interest you charge, which I don't know because I don't know your terms. Kellner was very still. 12% monthly, he said. Petra ran the number. Then, it's higher than that now. Considerably. She looked at him. He looked at her. Across the room, Sylvie was laughing again, the sound cutting through the ambient noise like a key in a lock. "He can't pay it," Petra said. "You probably already know that. So what are you actually here for?" The precondition of a smile again, gone before it arrived. "I have a problem," Kellner said. "In my books, money moving in ways I haven't authorized, through accounts that look correct at the surface and are not correct underneath. Internal skimming," Petra said. "Or redirection. I don't know which yet. Those are different problems with different solutions." "Yes," he said. "They are." She understood then, or she began to. She looked at her glass, at the water, at the way the chandelier light refracted through it. "You want me to find it," she said. "Your father can't pay the debt," Kellner said. "But you might be able to work it off." She should have felt insulted. She registered the shape of the offer. She was a tool, a function, a means to an end. Her father's mistake being repaid by his daughter's skill. It was not a romantic arrangement. It was not even a dignified one. But she thought about the 3 nights at the kitchen table. She thought about the number. She thought about what happened to men who owed people like Kellner money they couldn't repay. "How long would it take to clear?" she said. "Depends how fast you work." "I work fast, I know," he said. "I looked you up. Before tonight." Petra set her glass down on the bar. "Then you already decided." "I'm still deciding. What's left to decide?" He looked at her, long enough this time that she felt it in her sternum, whether you can handle what you'd be looking at. The accounts aren't just unusual. They're connected to things that would make most people want to stop looking. "I'm not most people." "No," he said. "I don't think you are." Her father arrived 20 minutes later, flushed and apologetic and full of the particular nervous energy of a man who knew he was walking into something he couldn't charm his way out of. He found Petra first, which she knew was not coincidental. He needed the look of calm she projected. He'd always used her that way, as ballast. Good, you're here," he said, gripping her arm briefly. "Sylvie behaving?" "Define behaving." "Petra, she's fine, Dad." He looked past her at the room, and she watched his eyes find Kellner across the crowd. There it was, the recognition, the dread, the way his shoulder actually dropped half an inch. "He's here," her father said quietly. "Yes." "Did you?" "I talked to him." Her father turned to her slowly. "What?" "He has an offer for me, but it might be the only one for you," she told him. He listened with his face going through several colors she didn't have names for. At the end he said, "Petra, you don't have to." "I know." And that was the end of that conversation, because they both understood that she was going to do it. Sylvie materialized at their father's elbow. She'd done this her whole life, appeared at useful moments, disappeared from inconvenient ones. "What did I miss?" she said, looking between them. Their father said, "Nothing, sweetheart," and Petra said nothing at all, which was the same answer she'd been giving Sylvie her whole life. She started the following Tuesday. Kellner's offices were on the 14th floor of a building in the financial district that had the kind of lobby that was designed to make you understand immediately that you were not the most important thing in it. Black marble. A front desk staffed by a woman who looked at Petra's clearance badge twice before handing it back. She was given a room, a desk, a laptop, 3 locked external drives with passwords delivered separately, and a 4-digit code to access each layer of the accounting architecture. A man named Brent, young, careful, who looked at her the way most people looked at tools they weren't sure would work, briefed her on what she'd have access to and what she wouldn't. He used the word sensitive 11 times in 20 minutes. She counted. Kellner himself she didn't see until the 3rd day. She was working through a routing discrepancy in one of the subsidiary accounts. A small thing, a rounding error on paper, but rounding errors that repeated themselves at the same interval were never actually rounding errors. When the door opened. She didn't look up immediately. She was in the middle of a figure. "You're here early," Kellner said. "I was here yesterday at 7, she said, still not looking up, and the day before." A pause. "Brent didn't tell me." "Brent doesn't come in until 8:30. She finished the figure and then looked up. He was in the doorway, jacket off, sleeves pushed up. There was another scar on his left forearm, older than the one on his face. He looked like he'd been awake for a long time. "I think I found something." He came to the desk, stood beside her, close enough that she could smell something like coffee and something colder underneath it, and looked at the screen. She walked him through it, the recurring discrepancy, the interval, the account it routed through before dispersing. The name attached to that account, which was a name he recognized, she could tell by the way his jaw changed when he saw it. He was very quiet for a moment. "You're certain," he said. "I'm never certain until I've run it 3 ways, she said. "I've run it twice. I need access to the upstream ledger to run it a 3rd time. He looked at her sideways. "That's not in your clearance. I know, I'm asking you to change that." He straightened. She waited. The room was very quiet. Just the hum of the building and the soft sound of her own breathing and the particular quality of silence that existed around a man who was deciding something. "You'll see things in that ledger," he said. "I assume I will. Things you won't be able to unsee, Mr. Kellner." She turned in her chair to face him fully. "I balanced the books for a dry cleaning operation in Eastville for 3 years that was definitely not just cleaning clothes. I did the accounts for a bail bondsman who had 17 LLCs, 11 of which didn't correspond to any actual bondsman activity. I have been doing this kind of math my entire working life because it's the only math people like me get offered." She held his gaze. "I am not going to be shocked by your ledger." He looked at her for a long time. She didn't look away. "Come back tomorrow at 7, he said. "The access will be updated." She found the leak on a Thursday. It was a Thursday morning in October, the rain hitting the 14th floor windows in sheets, and Petra was on her 3rd coffee and her 2nd hour of tracing a transfer sequence that kept disappearing at the same junction, looping through a legitimate vendor account, and then fragmenting into micro-transfers, small enough to miss individually, but staggering in accumulating months. The transfers had been running for 18 months. Someone patient, someone who understood the system well enough to hide inside it. She pulled the original authorization logs, ran the timestamps against the access records, cross-referenced the same login every time. A name she'd seen in the org chart. She sat very still for a moment. Then she picked up the direct line, the one Brent had told her was for urgent matters only, and I mean actual emergencies, not just questions, and she dialed. Kellner answered on the 2nd ring. "I found it," she said, "all of it. 18 months of transfers, $1.2 million, and I can tell you exactly who did it and exactly how." Silence on the line. "Come to my office," he said. She laid it out on his desk. Printed pages. She still printed, always printed, because screens could be adjusted and paper couldn't. With every transaction annotated, every timestamp highlighted, the transfer pathway illustrated in the margin in her own handwriting. He stood over the desk and read. He read slowly, which she appreciated. Men who skimmed important information made her nervous. When he finished, he looked up. "You're certain," he said. Not a question this time. 3 ways, she said. He was quiet. She could see the calculation happening behind his eyes. Not anger exactly, or not only anger. The kind of cold assessment that preceded a very specific type of decision. "The debt," he said. "Yes," she said. He looked at the papers again. "This took you 8 days." "Yes. The last person I had looking at this took 6 weeks and found nothing." She didn't answer that. It didn't need an answer. "The debt is cleared," he said. She nodded once. She'd known it would be. That wasn't the part she was unsure about. "What happens now?" she said. He looked at her directly. The scar above his eyebrow was more visible in the office light. He looked, up close, like a man who had been carrying something heavy for a very long time and had learned to carry it so well that other people forgot he was carrying anything at all. "That depends," he said. "On what?" "On whether you want to stop." She held his gaze. "I told you. I'm not most people." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said in the same even, measured voice he'd used at the bar of the Aldercrest Hotel, "The numbers tell stories, Miss Vane. Mine. Then you should know they don't end cleanly." Petra looked at the papers on his desk, at the 18 months of careful theft she'd unwound in 8 days, at the name she'd written in her own handwriting at the top of the summary page. "I don't need clean," she said. "I need accurate." Kellner looked at her for a long moment. The same way he'd looked at her across the bar, that quality of being read, and then, for the first time, the precondition of a smile actually arrived. It was brief. It was not warm. But it was real. "Tuesday," he said. 7 o'clock. Petra picked up her bag. "I'll be there at 6:50, she said, and walked out.